Welcome back to the Business of Laravel podcast, where I talk to business leaders who are working in and with Laravel. My guest today is Alex Millar, CTO and founder of GovAI.com, and plenty more, but we're just kind of focused there for today. So Alex, would you mind just kind of saying hi to everybody and sharing a little bit about what is GovAI and who are you, what's your history, and what's your kind of relationship with Laravel?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So I'm Alex. Yeah, I'm building GovAI. This is my second venture. So I previously built a product called website domain would go bonfire.com. Company's name was Bonfire, and built that for about 10 years, went through Y Combinator, scaled it, sold it in 2019, took a little time off, handed over the company, stayed a bit, took some time off, and I'm doing this new thing now. So it's been a journey, and part of why we connected is for this new thing we're all in on Laravel, where I wish I had been all in on Laravel for the old one, and man, it's been just such a positive experience so far. So
I love that. And we talked for just a tiny bit beforehand, and one of the things you mentioned is you're not new in the PHP world. Like your last one was with PHP as well, but this project is your first one with Laravel, and I have lots of things I want to dig into there. But I think my first question is, how did you discover Laravel in between the two?
You know what? My co-founder is addicted to reading Hacker News. And when we were getting started, end of 2022, some post, I think, hit the front page of Hacker News on nice. Is PHP good again? Or something like that in and around Laravel. And he's like, hey, you should really look at it. And, I was really deep in the throes of what are we going to pick from a tech stack and framework, because I felt the pain of letting things kind of like letting the potato grow the ears, and not nipping those off, right? In the old company. And so I was really drawn in initially to everything's in React, and, Prisma seems really hot, and Remix and all this stuff. And, I was really looking into it, but also I never got strong in React or in those worlds. And I never really liked JavaScript, getting in there. It always just felt odd to me, difficult to really build in that. So my co-founder Corey was like, hey, you should take a look at Laravel. And then I looked at it, and it was interesting because at the initial blush is the JavaScript ecosystem, at least end of 2022 compared to Laravel, they have the sex appeal in terms of how they market all their websites. I'm not trying to show shade, and there's new designers over at the Laravel team and big awesome stuff happening, but I go to the Remix site right back then. You're like, wow, this feels expensive and rich, and it doesn't mean it's necessarily the right choice for you, right? But so I was dealing with that personally as I know nothing about either of these. This seems like the nice fancy car, whereas maybe the Laravel website doc site wasn't presenting that way to me at that time. Sure. But I pushed through in the sense of the book, you don't judge a book by its cover. Yeah. And just as I kept opening up and reading the docs and looking, there's this and then that, and I had my Obsidian file for taking notes on everything was just exploding with all my Laravel stuff, and this person, I should bookmark that and save these, and wow, these courses, and it's it seems like every element of what I would need to do, and then I all of a sudden land on something Laracast. It's holy crap, that's insane. Just that alone is so good, right? So just every kind of next chapter that I turned to and read the first few pages of the chapter was just it felt like it was never ending of how much was fleshed out there, right? And so that's how I ended up saying let's do this in Laravel and go all in. And we start building some stuff, and then you actually feel it versus reading it. But so that's kind of how it all came to be for us. So.
Okay. And is Laravel powering the whole app or just a backend API? Kind of what's the relationship between GovAI and Laravel?
Yeah, so it's powering the whole app. We run it, so we're Laravel, Livewire, and deploy on Vapor is kind of our stack.
Nice. And I know that a lot of people in the startup world, because usually when I have people on here, they have historically not been fully immersed in the Y Combinator startups, Bay Area kind of world. And so you were there. We've heard a lot of people say, I found Laravel, and then some investor or some technical leader said, oh, well, JavaScript or die, right? Did you get any pushback when you were trying to choose Laravel?
I didn't get pushback, but I do remember getting hard pushback with the old company being in PHP, and at least to start, meeting with some investors and people being pretty flippant about it. I'll say, to an element of like, we're not going to invest unless you rewrite this off, CodeIgniter. Now, CodeIgniter was showing some age at the time, and we were in transition. But, I don't know what people would be at now. Like if I was in those meetings again with investors, but the proof's in the pudding in terms of how quickly you ship and growing your company, right? So. You can't, I guess if you're not growing well and it's not happening, it'd be easy for someone to try and poke holes at whatever they want to poke holes at. But, growth forgives all sins, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially in the investment world. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So when you first got started, I mean, part of what was interesting for you was switching to a new, ecosystem, right? You were moving from PHP and CodeIgniter, and then also taking a break for a couple of years. Things probably changed even in that world, and all of a sudden you're stepping into Laravel. So I imagine part of the challenge then was, just getting into a new tech ecosystem. But you've also kind of mentioned that there was some speed there. So what was it like for you as your first challenge, just being like getting familiar with the ecosystem and the programming and like how to do idiomatic Laravel as you were building a functional app? And this is not some like piddly little side project by somebody, like you've built and sold a very, your website says how much you sold it for, and it's a very large number. So you've done this before. So this is not someone just kind of kicking something around. Did you do side projects first? Is this your actual first Laravel app? What was that kind of like spinning up project like for you?
Yeah. Well, it was even more than that because I hadn't really written any code in a serious way for the last, since I'd say about end of 2017.
Okay.
Right? Because we raised a Series A for the old. Yeah, we raised a Series A early 2017. I ended up having about 20 people on my engineering team, and you are fully managing that and growth and fires, right? So I hadn't really been writing code a lot, which was a problem in the old company. I have some thoughts to circle back on that later. So when we started GovAI, it was end of 2022 when I was kind of like figuring out this tech stack, and I basically just, Laravel knew, GovAI app and just started building, right? Like, okay, well, let's start with Jetstream, right? And get in there and get a feel for and add a feature. And, the best way was just doing something and doing something real. Like, this is what I want to build features versus the quintessential make a to-do list app, right? Because you don't find those weird things, right, until you actually hit your business requirements. So, and it was a little slow and clunky for me at first, right? As you kind of get your footing back, but then just as you got going, and then all of a sudden, okay, I'm going to install Nova, and then being like, Artisan Nova resource create. Oh, it's just the same Eloquent model. Oh, and now it's all, and everything's, and the policy classes are all tied in, and I just have a fully working admin piece, and it
just works.
I swiped my credit card, and it works, and now I can basically run a CLI, and it does 80% of the work, and then with a little bit of AI code complete where it can tell the files, it will fill in the properties for me, and then you're off to your races, right? So it was just a lot of like, okay, do the next thing, read the docs, figure it out, and then I stumbled into Livewire, and I've been, I feel like I email Caleb too much, just things that are like, I'm loving what you're doing. And it's just like, maybe like, Alex, chill a little bit, right? But I can't get over how much easier it makes us to write. My proof on the pudding for that is I hired one of our old guys I worked with in the other company who's in DevOps traditionally, right? So he's Python guy, living in AWS, doing infrastructure as code, using Ansible and whatnot. And I'm like, hey, can you help with some of these front-end features? Because we have some bugs and stuff. And I just dropped him in, and he figured it out and had no problem doing it because it's just just that easy, right? It's just HTML on a wire and just kind of hook it up. So, anyways, I'll tee off that thought, Matt, because we said in the before the show, I can ramble a little bit.
This is all
about things. So
fantastic stuff. It's really good stuff, and I love the note that sometimes gets lost in the questions of what can Livewire do and what can't Livewire do is Livewire can allow not even just back-end programmers, because you think you got like front-end and you got back-end and then you've got like ops and DevOps, whatever. It can allow a DevOps person to ship front-end code. That's totally a pretty incredible testimony.
Yeah, exactly. And, there's lots of advanced stuff to do there, but even just coming in and saying, well, we have a bug, it's not that hard, right, to get in there and tweak something, right? So,
So as you are building GovAI, are there ways where you are able to kind of either accomplish your goals or the goals of your end users or the goals of potential investors differently as a result of having chosen Laravel? I mean, speed might be one you can talk about, but are there any other ways your team is structured differently or anything else, any other benefits you're getting from choosing Laravel?
Yeah, I think the benefits so far where we've been deeply focused, because we've been a team of two for, up until today actually. So we have a new dev that started today. Awesome. So we've been a team of two, but we were taking advantage of everything we possibly could in Laravel to avoid the pains we felt and grew into in the old company, right? So like seeders, just as a concept, like undervalue. I don't know if people undervalue them, but I value them like they're amazing, right? And it's just, okay, build really, really good seeders. And we have some relatively, not sophisticated, but robust seeders, right? And we're adding new things. It's like, hey, there's a PR app. Why don't you have some seeder data for that to pull something in? And I'll take one step back from that. The broad category of the old sins of the other company was, as we got bigger, it became harder to introduce change confidently and quickly, right?
Yes.
And at the end of the day, we're trying to deliver value to users, and we do that through changing the system. And if it's slow to do that or risky or all these things, that's where you just start to fall behind, or things get more costly, or you get tension between product and engineering, or tension between the executives. So Laravel's made it really easy. Like almost everything we've gone out to build so far, we've been like, oh, that didn't take as long as I thought it was going to take, which is
fantastic. I love
which
that.
is rare, right? Now, I think that there's a lot of little things we put in place for that. So like really good seeders, really focusing on maintaining test quality and coverage out the gate, right? And making sure the tests can run fast and they're meaningful. Lots of little like just the shell script automations, but like I can check out a peer's branch and it'd be like the defaults on a Git hook checkout, or like, do you want to reset up your local to like install their whatever composer they have, rerun the seeders, like do all the stuff, and like yes, and now I can run with whatever data he has set up, my coworker, really easily locally and play with it, and then jump back to my branch later and rebuilds my seeders and stuff. So I think people who are in Laravel are like, yeah, this is all obvious stuff, but as somebody who's living in a world where that wasn't like a thing that was included in your framework, you go, wow, it's so nice how tight this is integrated, right? So, yeah.
Well, and I love that, because one of my hopes with this podcast is for people who are doing business and may not live in Laravel on a day-to-day basis, see what might motivate or behoove them to choose, Laravel. And so I love this perspective that you're giving of like, hey, by using Laravel, we win in this direction. We get it easier in this direction. We're able to avoid those pains. And I mean, almost every conference talk I've given in the last 5 years has referenced this great talk called Min-Maxing Software Development. And it's a very, very academic way of looking at coding at a Laracon Europe a few years back. And the guy basically just said, like, the most important thing is to optimize for the cost of change. Like, you should not try and build the perfect system that will adapt to every single potential thing that happens down the road. You should build the system that is as easiest to change. And I love that you're kind of naming that as a valuable thing, because I don't know if people fully understand that, the importance of that. Yeah,
and I think on the other end, so I did the previous company for 10 years, especially if you're a first-time builder of starting a company, or even like, you went to university, the longest code base you ever worked on was maybe an internship, like 4 months or 8 months.
Yep.
So things get weird over years and years, and new people in and out. And so it's not just, it's easy to introduce change. It's easy to onboard new people. It's when people move on, because even if you run a great company, there's an average lifespan of our people, right? Like call it 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And, something leaves when they walk out the door unless you can, enshrine it in tests and knowledge, right? And so all these things just compound over time, right? And really help you avoid getting, like the gunk in the gears, right? And you just slow down, and then people kind of want to flip the table and start again. And that's never a good idea necessarily, right? To just start a whole new project. So, yeah.
So for you, one of the questions I normally ask is, what has your experience been in hiring Laravel developers? And on the one hand, you've only done it once compared to, at your old company, you hired a bunch of people, but you have done it very recently. So I'm going to ask you, what has your experience been like of hiring Laravel developers?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's a little bit of a cheat because the gentleman I just hired did also work for me previously at the old company. However, I think I have a slight tangent or version of that. So we recently hired and have been working with the vehicle team.
Oh, cool.
To help us deliver some stuff because we're in the same town as them. So it's very convenient. It's local, right? So that's been awesome. They're very competent, in Laravel, but it just ties in all the stuff of like, hey, well, we put good things in place and it's easy to get the branches checked out environment. So it's just really easy to collaborate them and get in. And it's been really powerful because they know more. Like I'm learning a ton from them just in the style of like how they're going to code. They write some tests, right? And like, this is, they're very open to be like, let's do things the way you want it done. But I'm also like, I'm a noob, in Laravel. So please show me, right? So I have some opinions. Yes, exactly. Yeah. But one thing I'm really excited about, when we go a bit broader, a little bit of the hiring to start has been the strong people that we worked with previously. Part of the benefit is you're not rebuilding relationships and all these things, and you know what you're going to get, with somebody. When we get into that next phase into next year, because we're kind of like in this, you grow and you kind of unlock that next tranche of burning cash, right? So it's like we're growing, but we're burning cash like crazy right now. Looking at Laravel and looking at the like more bespoke ways of like going out to recruit will be. I'm planning on doing that, I guess I would say, and then a big way in which I did hiring previously at the old company and tend to do it here is I very much view it as a two-way street, right? It's suboptimal if either person doesn't get the full story from the hire, like the hiring process, right? Like that's ultimately the goal. So I try to, whether the candidate is confident enough to like interview me per se, or I am just very forthcoming and here's who you're going to work with. Even little things like when we put a job posting out, I put out like links to the LinkedIn profiles of who will your boss be. You know what I mean? So like you can get a sense. It's not just, I remember I joined Microsoft. This is a small tangent right out of university, and it was like cool. I didn't know. I guess I'm working for Office, and like you just show up with like 150 other people, and it's like you're interviewing for product management at Microsoft Office, or could have been Xbox, or could have been whatever. You didn't know until you showed up, right? So. But yes, making sure that it's very clear to them, whoever we're hiring and interviewing, what it's like working with me, how we work. One, I find it's also a competitive advantage as a recruiter, right? Because if someone's weighing what you have versus something else, but they have a way clearer picture of what they're going to get with you, even if some of the company seems a little flashier, maybe they have a slightly higher salary, it's just like, but I know what I'm going to get, and that's valuable, right? Versus having a false start in a role due to like misaligned expectations. And very much when I go to do that hiring, it's a lot mostly selecting for competence, right? And your ability to learn and grit and communication.
Yes.
Depends on the roles a little bit, right? But the idea is like Laravel or the way we do things can be learned, right? Are you a person who's open to learning? Do you dig down and rise to the challenge? Now that varies. If you're a junior dev, I don't expect you to be as gritty as a 10-year seasoned vet, right? And same thing on all the other, the communication skill set, right? It's can you clearly and concisely articulate your ideas and work well and communicate with others, because your realm of influence kind of you hit maybe a local maximum if you can't actually improve that skill set, and it can be hard to teach that versus teaching a technical skill. So
I know you've gone a lot of places, but which is great. But I did want to name something you said at the very beginning. You mentioned that you'd hired a vehicle, and I think that this is an underappreciated trick that especially people who are just getting started can use when they're building up their own internal team. I think maybe my favorite projects at Titan are probably nonprofits, just because I like nonprofits. But I think my second favorite after that is exactly the situation you're talking about, where somebody comes along and they said, hey, we're building this thing, and we just need somebody who knows what idiomatic Laravel is, who can kind of make sure we're making these right decisions up front. And sometimes we're just doing some like high level advising, like reviewing their pull requests, but often we're like building the thing alongside them. And they're like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Or why did you do that? Or can I pair with you on this or whatever? And it is so much fun being able to like bring people along and educate them, and especially if they really are that type of like self-directed learner, watching them kind of like really rise up to the point where like, yeah, you don't need me anymore. And that's like one of my favorite, like I don't want to be pandering to our clients because they're all capable and brilliant human beings, but there is a good moment to be like, at the beginning, you all did not know a bunch of things that we know, and at the end of the engagement, you don't need us in the same way you did, and it feels great to kind of like send the project out in the world. So I just want to name it's really cool that you've kind of come up with that cheat code.
And it gives me more confidence as well, too, because as much as I'm reading the docs and consuming things, getting someone who's contributed to 100 other Laravel projects of different shapes and sizes and saying, yeah, I think what you've got set up here is great so far. It's been really easy to contribute. You're not fighting with the framework. It leads. I'm directionally correct, at least, of some of the choices I've made, right? So
that's really cool. And I also really appreciate everything you said about hiring. It sounds very similar to my values in hiring. It's like, I want you to know what you're going to get. I want it to be something that sounds appealing to you up front. And then I want it to come true when you come to work here, so that we don't have any of those alignments of, well, I assumed it was going to be like this, or you said it was going to be like this and it wasn't, or whatever else. So I think it's really nice to just say, like, you're just being very empathetic and doing that. You're saying, I want to know what I would want if I was applying to a job there. And
exactly.
Let's just kind of make that happen. So that's very cool.
Yeah. And there's what I've learned over the years too, that awareness piece is, it's easy to say it's a two-way street. You should just interview me, but it's, for someone looking for in a stressful time, looking for a job, or whatever, they might not feel like they're in the environment to be as candid or open, or even though you come across that way. So you have to help coach people through that as well too, because there can be a lot of stress on the other side of the call for someone, right? So
that's so cool. And to your point, I didn't even realize that this was a great answer to my question, but the question was, what is it like hiring Laravel developers? And I tell people all the time, I can teach you how we work. I can't teach you to be a good person or a good learner or whatever. And you put those pieces together, and you even mentioned, you're like, look, I know this guy is a good person. He's a good developer. And he might be, writing a different language right now, but I can teach him Laravel. He can learn Laravel quickly enough because he's that kind of a guy. Like, you didn't have to hire a Laravel developer into that position. You hired a good programmer in that position, and they picked up Laravel quickly.
Totally. Yeah.
That's very cool. So I did have other questions about your career trajectory, like what has kind of helped you grow and stuff like that. But I know that you had some more things maybe queued up to talk about from how you chose to use Laravel in the business and stuff like that. So I actually wanted to kind of throw it over to you. Are there any topics that you kind of really were excited for us to talk about before I start asking more about your personal trajectory?
I mean, I had them on the notes. We touched on them on at moments here and there. We're like cedars, making it easy to introduce change. Just maybe a couple of things I'll mention in that realm of like, hey, do these things and do them well.
Yeah.
Right? In terms of, we've got good test coverage and we've written good tests. I haven't yet dug into doing mutation tests, but I'm very excited about the concept of that. Like we went in on pest, and just this idea of like, you have code coverage, but is it a worthwhile test, right? And so that's a new stone I'm ready, like excited to turn over. And as a total tangent, if anyone wants to talk about this aside, I have this like vision of a semi-AI, what the diff kind of code helping tool that like can go out and like nightly like try to run mutations and find things and suggest changes based on the failing mutations, which would be really, really cool, but I don't have time to look into that right now. So there's that cedars, that good testing. Also a concept that has been extremely valuable for us is architecture testing, which I think is relatively new overall. But the way I like to look at it and put it out there is we're trying to encode like, this is the way in tests. So certain things of like, of course you can add more columns to a table, but we don't really want them to get that wide because it can be performance issues. So, we have a small architecture test that basically says, okay, these tables are getting big. We don't want them to get wider anymore. So that'll fail a test, and you'll notice it in the PR versus, we agreed that we weren't going to, make the user's table any wider. We actually need to trim it, right? Or something you get burned on, this is really specific, but like, Linux and Mac OS have different case sensitivity for the file systems. And if you put something in your public dir and you check it in, then on your server, it might not recognize it due to case sensitivity. So we wrote an architecture test just to cover that. So you don't get burned by these little things. So it's just trying to like, anytime you're like, we have to remember something, get it encoded as code so that it can be repeated, and then we talk about that long term. You build that up over 5 years, and people come and left. Like that one time you got burned by it. Oh, that was one employee on one PR 2 years ago, and then maybe took down production or something like that, right? But it's like, oh, we got it as a test, so like that won't happen again. And we can write some nice verbose comments in there to explain why this happens and like reference the source material. So I'm excited for those with our new developer, and Vehicle has hit a few of these too. Is go, oh, the test suite failed. They're like, oh, Alex doesn't want us doing things this way, right? Because he wrote an architecture for that. So,
That's
so
awesome.
so that's been a good thing. But anyways, I without getting too nitty gritty on specific things, we could probably leave it on that topic and jump over to kind of next one.
Okay. And I do want to note on the architecture testing, we built something called TLint a while back that we're trying to trim it down as much as possible to hopefully eventually nobody needs it. But at the time, there's the only way to test certain things. And they were things much simpler than what Pest can do, but just things like we shouldn't see any of these, or whatever. And it was, I think there's two things. One was it did a whole bunch of blade testing, but the other one was it did certain things like no DDs, right? Like that was like the first thing that Pest showed as an architecture test. And we're like, no DDs anywhere. And it is, it's really great because if you think about code style linting and formatters, code should be written this way, but this way is a very narrow scope of what code kind of should be written. It means like, where do your commas go? But code style testing does not say it should be written this way such that everything that is in this directory should be named that way. Like, so architecture testing to me is your traditional code style linter formatters writ large. It's just an expansion of the same concept taken to a broader degree. And I'm like, I don't think anybody would disagree that having a consistent code style is of value. So I've found that people are pretty open to architecture testing as an idea, but not a lot of people have done a lot of it. So it's really cool to hear from you, like, two things. First of all, I guess three. One, that you're doing it. Two, that you're doing some things outside of what a lot of the standard examples of architecture testing are. Things like, the difference between Linux and Mac doesn't just have to be in everybody's brains, and you just have to you screw it up once and then you learn it after screwing it up. But no, it's actually encoded. Yeah. But third, I really like this idea of knowing that if your company is around long enough, you will see people who are a part of writing the original system leave with love, right? But they're still gone. And a lot of people say, well, how do we handle for that? And the answer is, well, make them write everything down. And I'm like, nobody's going to go read hundreds of pages of documentation, let alone want to write it in the first place. Yeah. And it's something that we often say when it doesn't come to somebody leaving is like, what's the best documentation? The best documentation is the tests. Now, we do still need those robust comments sometimes, but the test is the first place to start from. But I don't think I've ever heard anybody say, also use the tests as a way to encode knowledge about this code base in a way that when people leave, they've left behind their documentation. So I think that's a really helpful. I mean, I guess now that you've said it, it sounds obvious, but I've never heard anybody talk about it that way. So I really appreciate you introducing that concept.
And I'll just throw one more thing out there for anybody who says, oh, but this would be really hard to get started, and all of a sudden add them to an existing code base. We've written a lot of ours to be like, hey, we now want something done like this. So check all these classes or this area of the app and do all of them except, like, have an exclusions list so that you can eventually get the old things into the new way. That's right. Which works really well because that's what I felt of the old company is like, hey, you develop over time new standards, but you don't want to just put like it for the whole code base because you can't migrate to that really quickly. Yeah. And then so you do it with the exclusions, and then when a new person joins and does something and it barks at them, they go, why? This test failed. It says, okay, well, I'm supposed to do it this way. Yes, there are examples in the code base that are not doing it that way, but they're on the exclusion list for a reason, and we're trying to move off them over time, right?
So cool. You can also have like regular technical debt days where you just kind of say, okay, this one file on the exclusion list needs to move into the normal way of doing it. That's very cool. Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about you. This is because often when I have somebody on the show, they are at a position in their career that other people want to be at. And so, of course, I want to speak to, hey, other people at Alex's level, here's some things to learn from Alex about kind of like Laravel, stuff like that, but also people who want to get to Alex's level. So I want to talk to you a little about, especially as you are in a successful company, but you also are out of another successful company, and you had a decade in there. What was the process of getting to the point where you were able to start these companies, run them, build teams, figure out how to sell them? What did that look like? Was it all purely lived experience? Was there training and education that you went through? Are there books or courses or podcasts that you really have loved that have kind of gotten you to the point where you maybe where you are today, but also where you were when you were successful with Bonfire.
Yeah. I wrote a couple notes ahead of time thinking on this, but the one piece before a few of the specifics for being ready of like skills, when we talk about specifically like starting a company, let's say, right? A big thing you can do is reducing the risk of starting one, right? So if you have these aspirations, say, I want to start a company one day, I don't have an idea, I don't have these things, I don't have that, but just getting your finances in order in terms of like save your money, lower the risk, right? So like when you're really young and you don't have car, home, dependents, spouse, like there's it's easier, right? But as you get a little bit older, you pick up these things, it can become harder. So a good thing, whether you want to start one or not, is getting those things in order. And this also includes like having strong relationships with your spouse or your girlfriend, whoever it is, because you'll build a surplus and you'll debit from that sometimes when you have to work hard on things, right? Yeah. So getting those things in place makes it so that you are better positioned to take the opportunity to jump into something when it presents itself. Because a lot of life is that. Me starting Bonfire, I didn't have the idea, right? Now I was young and so it was easier to take the jump, and I'd been working at Microsoft for a little bit, but the story of Bonfire, of me getting involved in it, is I was in my final year of university. I met a girl. I really liked her, but I was leaving to go work at Microsoft in Seattle. And I did everything to try to get a job locally, but I couldn't. So I still went. As part of to get to know her, her sister's husband had the idea for Bonfire. I met him at Christmas. He showed me what he was working on. Next thing led to another. I was moonlighting while I was at Microsoft working on Bonfire, showing him I could build stuff. Yeah. And then he raised a little bit of capital, and I was like, well, I wanted to leave Bonfire, or I wanted to leave Microsoft anyways to come back to Canada to be with my girlfriend, now wife. Yeah. And I had saved a bunch of money when I was there because my costs were so it was easy to take the jump. But I could imagine today in my life, right, the idea of being like, move across the country to start that would be crazy. It'd be really, really hard. So, so you can do a lot to be able to because life is a lot of there's luck events that occur, right? And so setting yourself up to take advantage of the one. This has nothing to do with skill set and competency and all that stuff. It's just more of hey, if I had the chance, I could take it, and it wouldn't be as big of a risk. Because I've saved some money, because I've done these things. I have a strong relationship with my spouse, right? So that's one point that I think is not necessarily spoken about, but needed to jump in the risk, and then needed as you kind of continue working on something for a long period of time, right? So, yeah.
I want to hear your other ones, but I just want to note on that one. The idea of luck happens to everybody, but are you ready for the luck? It's so much less sexy than you just got to hustle and you got to push and you got to whatever. And it's not to say that that's not a part of it, but recognizing that you need to do the work now, not even knowing how it's going to pan out. But if you don't do the work now, when that opportunity comes, you're not going to be able to take it. It's, I don't know, man. It's it feels very classic, build integrity, build character, do the right thing, build up savings, in a way that sounds very humdrum, have a 9 to 5 or whatever. But doing that enables you to do the non-standard story, right? Do that other thing. So I love that. And I also really appreciate this naming of building up relational capital with your spouse. Anybody who's done any kind of reading on love and successful marriages and stuff like that knows about the idea of you're depositing from the bank, sometimes you're withdrawing from the bank, but explicitly naming that there are times in our career, even if that time is for something that hopefully will build us freedom and independence down the road. But there are times in your career where if you're going to do this thing, you're going to be withdrawing from that bank a lot. It's going to be very hard once you get there to make those deposits. Right? Yeah. You're there. You're now withdrawing. So you have to do this work ahead of time. I don't know, man. I don't know if I have anything to add other than what I want to really highlight those to make sure people are hearing those messages that you said, because those are both unexciting in some ways, unsexy in a lot of other ways. It's very much not what we're hearing from a lot of, startup culture and stuff like that. Yeah. But it's so good. I love that you said that.
And it's an element of because who you're going to tend to hear from are that I had an exit, I sold one, right? It's not that, I'm not saying you're not selecting people for the show that aren't the other way, but it's the survivorship bias or whatever, right? To say these people did all this other stuff, but 9 out of the other 10 people failed, and it wasn't just that their company failed, you know what I mean? They withdrew, they had a huge debt, you know what I mean? And it didn't work out. And so you're already taking a whole bunch of risk of you're paying yourself low when you start a startup. You have no money, you have to get customers, you have to get going, right? And, you want it to succeed, but man, like you don't want to lose everything, you know? So, yeah.
Wow, I want someone to make a podcast just interviewing failed startup founders or founders of failed startups. Okay, so I interrupted you and I had originally asked, kind of what has helped you get there. Were there any other answers, or was that kind of your main one? I wanted to make sure that you did.
That one was a lot about, hey, I want to start a company one day, right? So here's things you can do that don't guarantee you will or can start a company, but will make it easier when you do, when either an opportunity presents to be a co-founder, which for technical people I think is a very strong path, because there are a lot of business-ended folks out there who are, there's memes on this and all this stuff, right? Of like, I want a technical co-founder, but as someone technical, if you want to be a CTO co-founder, right? You don't necessarily have to come up with the idea and be that. You need to set yourself up to take the opportunity to capitalize on luck, and then expose yourself to luck events, i.e. go out and meet with these people at events and the stuff and talk and get out there, right? So there's all that. And then there's like the skill set, and I had a few items on there. And a lot of these are, it's kind of like the classic thing. It's like, cool, you can start working out tomorrow, but you're not going to see anything quick. It's a lot of slow reps, My background that led me even to that point, so when I was growing up, I was in Air Cadets here in Canada. I don't know what the U.S. kind of style things are like that, but it's like a paramilitary organization. Like you're basically pretending you're in the Army to a degree.
I think the Boy Scouts is the closest we have.
Yeah, but this is like you're wearing an Army uniform, you're polishing your boots, you're doing the drill and the guns and like all that stuff, right? Wow. I did pilot training with it and whatnot. So I did that because I was originally on the path and wanted to, as part of that, go to Royal Military College, which I don't know the exact equivalent in the U.S. is, but that's, you're in the Army pays for school, you go to university with the Army, right? So I started doing that. Is it training you to
be an officer or no?
To an officer, yes. Yeah.
Okay, so West Point may be our closest.
West Point, yes. Yeah, it would be definitely the closest. So I was on that path. So I learned a lot in that experience. Nothing to do with building companies and all that stuff, but about leadership and doing it wrong and getting the reps in and learning, very small things that become kind of edicts in your mind. It's like, you never chew someone out in front of their peers, right? Yeah. And the Army does that on purpose in specific ways, but, in a non-Army context, right? Yeah. It's very debilitating to somebody, right? And demoralizing. So that was a big thing I did. These are kind of precursor stuff. So it's not go join the Army isn't the takeaway from this. But but you learn something from there, and so can you simulate that in some other way of putting yourself in organizations locally, whether it's volunteering for something that gets you to take on leadership roles and lead people outside of work, like TBD what it is. But that was a bit of my experience, and then, like I said, I was a year out of university. I was showing some of those signs, at least to Corey, who we got to know me through our spouses. Yep. And then as I was on the job, the big thing that I was really focused on, I have like a couple resources on here, is that learning. And I'm absolutely obsessed with the Knowledge Project podcast, Canadian guy, Shane Parrish. His big thing, his tagline is like classic, timeless, like lessons. And like, if you could go back to any episode and they're good, they're not like talking about necessarily current events. They're all in there. And there are two like learnings from there that I had highlighted, like the show notes even linked here as well. One was about leadership from this gentleman named Randall Stutman, I might be mispronouncing it. Mm-hmm. And this idea of that when you give feedback, you need to be as intentional about you need to give just as much effort and attention to the positive elements as the constructed ones. Mm-hmm. So it's not the like good, bad, good sandwich. It's like, I'm going to really sit down and think about something that I can actually genuinely positively say about this and be just as intentional, because it's easy to be intentional about the negative stuff. Yeah. And what was good about this? Oh, nothing was good about it. It was all terrible. Yeah. Something was, right? Like find something, right? And put it in there. And just this one other lesson that I learned these are small things, right? But I'd say like, just start listening to that podcast. I mean, it doesn't get you there, but there's all these little leadership things in there that are amazing. This idea of it's a quick mental model, right? But just checking myself and being like, am I above or below the line right now? And being above the line is like, I'm open to new ideas. I'm in more of a victor mentality. Like I'm ready to take things on, versus in a closed model, you're below the line, you're closed, you're a bit more defensive, you may have a bit of more of a victim mentality, right? And, even like things where, you're how you might be like manifesting yourself. And those things come into the like, before I send this Slack message to somebody, as the CTO co-founder to the 50th employee this is their first job, and am I above the line or below the line when I'm sending that email, right? Or that Slack message or that PR comment, right? Yeah. So you can do those things now, not as a leader, but to demonstrate, right, communication and influence in your current role, and get those reps in there, because you want to be sending messages and interacting when you're above the line. And if you're not, like, just step away from the keyboard, just walk away, take a break, My thing is usually go for a run. Like, that just gets me reset, right? Yeah. So anyway, a little bit tangential, but that Shane Parrish Knowledge Project, amazing. A few things I tend to like listen and then take notes, and I have my little like read me of Alex of like, hey, you're a new employee. Here's how to interface with Alex, and these are things that I've like lifted from that, or like these are great moments. Like listen to them. If you don't listen to it, here's the little takeaway that I did for you, right?
Wow.
Yeah,
it's probably weird, but if there's ever any way for you to share even maybe like a little bit, maybe not the whole read me, because I know that might be super personal, but like if there's ever a way to share like a little bit of it, maybe like sure. I think that's a fascinating concept. I'd love to learn more, and if you're willing, I'm sure the folks listening would like to as well.
Yeah, I'll take a look at it, and I could like link to it on my website, send it to you directly as well too, for others. So, and there's one other resource. It's just a video, and I've probably watched it like 50 to 100 times, and I give it to anybody who's ever struggling with communication, and more in the verbal sense, right? Around like when I'm delivering one-to-ones and I'm with an intermediate dev and they want to be a senior dev and they want to get there, and I'm like, internalize and look and watch this video. So it's a TED Talk called Speak So People Want to Listen. Okay. And it talks about two parts, right? It talks about like your literal voice, right? And like tapping into like speaking loud, speaking softly, and pacing and timing. And like, this is an instrument, and you could look at it and be like, that's stupid, I shouldn't have to do that. But if you speak in a monotone noise and like really annoying and repetitive, like people aren't going to want to listen to you. They're going to tune out, right? And so your ability to lead and influence others will be constricted by the quality of how you speak, right? Yeah. And anybody can do this, right? And then there's an element of like on that talk, it's really good about the content of your speech, right? If you're the type of person who's really into gossip and complains all the time and all these other things, those are like you're at the water cooler and you're whining and complaining about X, Y, and Z. Like things can be frustrating, but now you're presenting yourself in a certain way, and that's probably not going to anybody who's viewing you in a leadership role or things like that make them want to elevate you to some status. It's like, it's not to say like you never have gripes in the world, right? But his example in the talk was like, often my grandmother, I ask her and say, how is today? It's Tuesday, and she goes, isn't it dreadful? It's just like, okay, that's not going to set us up for a great conversation, right? She's just happens to be, anyways, it's a good little talk. I'm not doing it justice, but those are like kind of three elements. Like again, I pulled from that readme on Alex of things that I've learned that I try to make easy for others, and then that readme talks a lot about like how to best interface with me and where are my strengths and where do I falter, and I will say I can always talk if you give me space, I'll talk, and so start to learn how to be able to corral me, and that's easier, like I said than done with someone who's new and getting started, but even by naming it and calling it out, it helps to give the permission to do that versus someone being like, oh my God, I was on with my boss for an hour and he wouldn't stop talking, right? Like,
Oh, that's so cool. I mean, I definitely have found that sharing that I have ADHD has given people a lot of permission to kind of be like, yeah, okay, Matt is, whatever, off in space, or has a whole bunch of great ideas, but doesn't always remember the idea he had last week or whatever else it ends up being, So it's fun. I've done that in just that narrow scope. Just being able to say like, hey, here's something that gives you permission to understand how to interact with me. But I'm just blown away by this idea of the README, of just a broader scale of like, here's everything that you want to consider, good and bad, how to get what you want or whatever from me. So one of the things that I had noticed that seems to be a thread through, not everything, but a lot of the things you're saying here are this: if you do well in small things, then big things are going to be available to you in different ways. You might be ready for them when they come. People might notice that you're doing the small things and then kind of give you more opportunity. You might be training yourself up for something. And it really has made me think about folks who've come into Titan at varying levels of theoretical ability, experience, or whatever, and how they have, some of them just skyrocketed through our growth levels. And it's not to say that everybody should be able to skyrocket or whatever, like it's totally fine if it takes time for growth. But I do realize that like one of the things that make people skyrocket the most is watching that work that they do regularly, diligently to improve themselves, to take advantage of opportunities or whatever. And they're not skyrocketing just because they came in day one brilliant, although many of them have come in day one brilliant, but because of who they showed themselves to be and how they showed that they do things when it was just something smaller, just this one project. But if you, on every single project you're on, the project is better, even if we don't always know why. We don't see everything that happens, but every project is better because you're there. If every person you work with may not say something, and then when I ask them 6 months later, they say, oh my gosh, working with her was the best experience I've ever had. You build up your own skills, and also everybody around you's likelihood to want to give you opportunities. And so I just noticed that thread, like you've said probably 4 different ways where if you do the thing when it's not the moment, you're going to be so much more ready for the moment. And I appreciate how that's very clearly a very well kind of that goes throughout your whole way of thinking. Does that sound reasonable or familiar?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's in my README as well too. It's like, what's the one word? And it's like that. I think it's like, I care about integrity, right? And like that's what that is, right? It's doing the right thing when no one's looking.
Yes.
I mean, maybe this all boils back not to be like, let's psychoanalyze this, but I had a very formal experience when I was about 5 years old, where I was at a corner store and some teenagers would be like, I wanted a piece of bubble gum. Dad said no. Teenagers like, just take it. It's a 5-cent thing. And I took it, and then I'm walking around at home thinking I'm a hot shit, chewing on my gum, and Dad's like, where'd you get that gum, Alex? And he drove me back to the store and made me apologize to the clerk at the store and pay the 5 cents for the piece of bubble gum, right? But like, I was like 5 years old. I still very vividly remember that, and so that's a little integrity lesson there, right? So, so that maybe that's all where it kind of boils through for me and why I feel that and express that. But I've seen it, and that's why I'm hiring some of the people from the old company and bringing them in as well too, right? Because they did that, through and through all the time, and it reduced my risk, as a business owner and trying to build to bring these folks on. And we won't only do that, right? We will bring out new people. That's just a little bit of I can short circuit, us moving really quickly, because I don't need to necessarily do all of the let's build up the relational capital together and learn each other, right? We can kind of just drop in and go. And so that's even another little minor thing on this, which is like, if not at your current role, if you work and you get exposed in your current role over a 4 or 5 year period to 30, 40, 50, 100 other people, and you show that all the time, they will go to new companies in the next 4 to 5 years, and their companies will need people, and they'll be like, oh my God, you should hire Steph, you should hire John. I would love to work them with a heartbeat. And that's where the opportunities get created for you, right?
Oh, that's fantastic. Man, I'm supposed to be wrapping this up already. This is so good. Okay, so let's see. I would say, I think my last is going to be, well, this is hilarious. Hold on. Before I say hilarious, is there any advice that you would want to give? Actually, just step away from that. Is there anything that you wish we had talked about today that you feel like we didn't get time to? I'm supposed to wrap this thing at 45 minutes. We're at 50, and I feel like we got another hour of conversation. So is there any one last thing that you're like, man, I really wanted to make sure we got a chance to talk about this we didn't get to?
Yes, I think you would get there in the next question. But one thing I'm really hoping selfishly a little bit to get from this, because Matt, you get to get me exposed to a broader audience, is I have an amazing CTO peer group here locally in Kitchener-Waterloo,
nice.
Of other local businesses that are in the area. I really, really want to have like a Laravel specific. I was going to email every one of your past guests just directly, personally, right? But a Laravel CTO or director of engineering, like this high level engineering peer group, right? So maybe you're gonna ask me if I want to link. I don't have any links for any of this. It's not a thing that's out there yet. The version is just email me. I can put my email in the show notes, I guess.
Yeah.
If you're interested in this, and the gist is, it's not like a Discord and a chat and whatever. It's like we're in an email group. If we get a lot of people that say yes, we'll segment it out. But it's my peer group's like 6 to 8 people who are regularly on the call. We meet once a quarter over lunch, and everyone just comes to the table and eats and is just like, what's the biggest problem you're having right now? Mm-hmm. And we just go around the table. And it's been so valuable, and I would love to have that in a Laravel ecosystem, because we're going to have the like, oh my God, I hit this gnarly thing, and someone's going to be like, I did it, or I can ask my team and then get those answers quickly. And I think there are, I don't know, I want that. You might be able to tell me like something's out there that I'm missing that already exists. There's LaravelPeerGroup.com or something like that, right? But
we're gonna talk more after this. But I do think that folks should just for now, they should just email you if they're interested.
Yeah.
I love that idea. So
yeah.
Okay, cool.
So that was one thing I wanted to hit on. I guess it's kind of a plug thing, but not really. It's just it's something that I wanted to make sure was said.
Okay. And normally I do also ask, are you hiring? And I know that you just hired, but is there any chance you'll be hiring in the near future, or do you think you're good for now?
If all goes according to plan into 2025, yes, I will be hiring more people. I would say in the short term, fire me an email if I seem like the type of person you would want to work with in terms of what we're doing. And at a minimum, I can build a list. So when I post a role, I can blast you so you know. But I don't have an ATS and all these things set up to like capture emails ahead of time. But if you listen to this and you get to this far in the show and you're like, I'd love to work or maybe work or whatever, just fire me an email and I'll at least get it into a Google Sheet somewhere so I can email blast everyone when we post a role. So,
is there a pro? Do people get bonus points or if they're in Kitchener-Waterloo?
No, we're definitely open. I mean, we're in Canada, so it's easier for us to hire Canadians right now, but we will expand out and have a U.S. subsidiary eventually and be ready to hire into the U.S. And we'll probably actually strategically want to do that as well. So no, but I think the only thing is that we're probably still in the North America time zone currently. So yeah.
Okay. All right, and this last question was making me laugh, and I don't know why I was acting like I can't say this because it's on your website, but your website says you guys had a $108 million exit. And obviously, $108 million exit does not mean $108 million in your pocket, but it does make me laugh that that's literally my last question. So if you personally, in your pocket, somebody came along and said, for GovAI, for your portion, you're going to walk home with $100 million after taxes, what do you do tomorrow?
Yeah, it's a good question because I had not that number, right, but a much smaller number than that, because you multiple founders and you get diluted through raising and all the rest. But I think there's a big element of it's exciting and it's new. And all these are relative to dollar numbers, but the big thing that I think about having had the previous exit and the new one is things get easier in terms of like you can remove pain in your life, right? About like, I can easily afford to have a cleaner now, and that gives me time, right? It's exciting and daunting, and it's not like I'm not complaining or anything like that, but it's like more money, more problems. Like there's a new class of problems that you get, right? That come up. But you want to make it so that the money doesn't stress you out or these things that cause you problems, right? And gives you freedoms, it gives you affordances, right, to do things and to take. So that's why I'm building this other company, not like to go make more money, but we built a great workplace for 150 people at the old place. They loved it. Like, man, if I can do that again, that would be awesome, right? Yeah. So yeah, you take some time. There was a moment there where it's like, I don't do software anymore because you're stressed and all these problems and things, and I'm going to go into building houses. Right. And then you realize that, oh my God, everything you do, if it's worth doing, is hard and difficult and there's no easy path. Right. So it would be foolish for me to pivot into home construction, versus doubling down on my skill that I already have, right, that I've built over the last 10 years. Yeah. So this is a little bit meandering. Like if we sold GovAI and my share was worth $100 million right now, yeah, we'd probably do some nice vacation, take some time off, I'd probably spend a couple of years not working on stuff with the kids more, right? And being able to really take advantage of that. But at the end of the day, like life needs purpose, and so if you don't reorient yourself into something in your community or other things you're doing, right, you can orient it into work, And again, we touched earlier on this, right? It's in that balance, like with family and relationships and all these things. So part of that will make that easier to a degree, but Yeah. It should be, money is a tool, and if you get it, and then you have a responsibility when you have it to do more with it in the world. And there were times when I didn't want to do it and build, and my dad's like, well, you're smart and you have this stuff and you have this opportunity. It's pretty rare, so you don't have to, but you ought to, So That's not the parents. That's the classic. I'm not angry, but I'm disappointed, but in a different direction, right? So
thanks, Dad.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Alex, I say this to most of my guests, but I mean it every time. But I could talk to you for hours, and I'm a little frustrated with my podcast format. But you know what? We're just gonna leave the people wanting more. If they do want to learn more from you, you mentioned emailing you, so we'll make sure your email's in the show notes. But anything else? Are you active on any social media? Is there any podcasts, any way for people to keep up with you?
Yeah, I have, Twitter, Blue Sky, the email will be in there. I'm like lightly active. It's kind of the last thing it's like focused on work, shut it down, focused on family. I'm a big, I have the instruments, and it's on my website, but I'm a big into miniature table war games and painting. So between that and then trying to stay fit, there's, it's hard to find the time to it can suck you in, but I have screen limits to keep me out of it. So I'm not really on there. I consume more than I create. But email, I love, if you send me an email and we can just one-to-one over email or whatever, right? That's the best way, for sure. So
I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience. Thank you so much for this time. Your openness is really, really valuable. And there's just so many things that you've said today where I'm like, and that's the best point. And that's the best point. That's the best point. So thank you. Man. This has been really, really fantastic.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate for having me on.
Yeah. And for the rest of you, we will see you all next time.